Hey everybody. Um, I hope everybody's doing okay in the middle of this craziness. I'm a little nervous. I'm a little kind of shaky, a little nervous because I just feel like I have an experience that I felt like would be good to share from my own life. And in the middle of this craziness, in the middle of a lot of fear and a lot of spiraling for people and paralyzed fear and people who might be experiencing symptoms of anxiety or depression like they maybe haven't before. Um, I just wanted to share a bit of my own story and be really personal and transparent about some things that have gone on in my own life that I hope are helpful, that I hope are encouraging. Um, I hope that might resonate with a few different people. And then also that might just um, make sense for a lot of people. I know I shared a post in December about depression and anxiety and my experiences with it. And I wanted to follow up and share with different people what that really looked like for me and be really clear so that if people were experiencing it themselves now, might be able to resonate with someone who's gone through it. And then I think in particular, I'm just like off the cuff here, so I'm not I don't have some like prescripted thing or anything, but um, yeah, you might know there's hope in that there's some things I've learned and grown in myself pretty strongly and pretty practically that might be helpful. First off, also, anyone who knows me knows I don't usually have this facial hair here. I am deciding not to shave during coronavirus stuff so I can actually see how thick my beard can grow. And so this is almost 2 weeks and it looks absolutely disgusting. So don't let that throw you off. So I wanted to share about this. I'm probably going to do a couple different videos on it just because the first one covers a couple different topics and a couple different things that have been helpful for me, a couple different things that I've grown in and that have been really good. And yeah, essentially this has been a 6 month journey for me. It started in August of 2019 and went really, really strongly throughout the rest of 2019, all the way through December. And then January was a better month for me. It was one when I started to get better. And then by the end of 6 months, by the end of January, I actually started to feel like myself again for the first time. And I actually felt like I was not struggling and I in the same ways that I had been struggling and I hadn't been fighting the same things. So I wanted to share about that. This first topic, this first video I wanted to share about is specifically related to the issues of self-compassion versus self-condemnation. And also, just so you know, for people who are without a faith background or something like that, if that's not your thing or you've not really been part of it, faith and hasn't been part of your story, I still think it's worth listening to. You're going to hear me talk about God a lot because that's what I view as truth for me, and that's where I view reality for me, and where a lot of the principles that I'm talking about and the things that I've gone through, the source is for me. But I think the principles and stuff going to make sense either way. So whether you have faith or not, whether you believe in God or not, I think it's going to be helpful either way. I'm just telling you where I find my source for these truths that I feel like have really led to liberation and freedom from depression, anxiety, and this paralyzing fear. Even though it's still processing, it's still something that I'm continually processing and working through. I've been better equipped and felt like myself to be able to handle it. So let me get into the story. Let me share a bit about what's been going on. In my life, I have had previous anxiety and depression issues. Not depression, actually. I've had previous anxiety issues. Growing up, there were different points in high school where I'd have a little flare up here or there. In college, I actually had some pretty significant anxiety issues, especially social anxiety. And there'd be points where I couldn't hang out with people. I struggled a lot. I remember calling my dad one time in college, just bawling on the phone, and because I couldn't figure out my emotions. And I called my dad because my dad had struggled with depression in his life. And my family history has quite a bit of depression and anxiety issues, mental health issues. And so I'm aware of that. And I know that my family in general, even from both sides of the family, have had some mental health struggles. So being aware of that's been really good to know. And so I had that. I had some college issues. I've had some stuff occurring once in a while since college. But in college, I actually was at the point where I was on medicine for a little bit. I was on specific medication, and it was helpful for a while. And for some reason, I chose to like wean myself off of it and not use it anymore. That's maybe not the best choice, I can say. But yeah, so I've had different anxiety and depression issues before in my life. It's come up in different times, but this year was different. This wasn't a spurt. This wasn't a week. This wasn't a time like that. This was 6 months of debilitating depression, spiraling anxiety, and paralyzing fear. It started in August. I was at a leadership retreat, actually, which is a weird place for this to happen. I can't really tell you why this kicked it off. I know that I was surrounded by a bunch of different leaders at that point, and I was, I think, struggling with comparing myself and feeling like I wasn't the same leader. I wasn't adequate, or I was doing less than, or everybody else felt so much more impressive than me. And so I was at that retreat, and I just remember I started to feel off. Like it just felt like everything was off. Felt just not right and off. So as in August, and then all of a sudden it just started to spiral. It's the best way to put it. If you've struggled with anxiety issues, you might know that sense of spiraling, but it spiraled altogether in a lot of different ways. So I really began to struggle with and question just about everything in life. I had multiple significant relationships in my life across a lot of different lines that became very, very difficult to navigate. That became just wasn't feeling right about, was trying to figure out what was going on. And it was just really, really, really difficult. Very struggling. And it just caused a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety over how am I supposed to handle these specific relationships? What am I supposed to do with this? A lot of you know that I am involved in ministry and pastoral ministry, and I care especially about cross-cultural work and justice issues. And I've sensed a call towards being a pastor in settings. And so I started, for some reason, to really, 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 really question that. Not that I didn't want to do it, and not that my heart wasn't in it, but for some reason, I just started to not know how to move forward in that. I felt so inadequate. I felt it was really weird too, because I was going through an ordination process. So I've been working towards getting ordained for about 6 years. It's been my goal. It's been what I've been wanting to do. And in that process, it was right as I had turned in this big paper, and my next step was doing this interview, and then I'd do another interview. And I remember when I went in for my first interview, like I just was in a place where I didn't know where I belonged. I felt lost in ministry. I felt lost in calling. I felt lost in, can I really be a pastor? God, like what is going on? I just felt lost in ministry. My personal worth and my self-worth felt like it was gone. It was just this constant spiraling of, I don't know what's going on. My mental health in general was really bad. And I actually was really struggling just with an existential reality and an existence itself. Praise God, I was never in a suicidal state. I never felt like I wanted to be suicidal or anything like that, at least. But I do know that it had gone into a deep, deep, deep depression and despair. Now, in the middle of this, I was grasping for help in a lot of different places. I had a spiritual director that I was meeting with. I had friends and ministry mentors and support that I would talk to about these things. I had a therapist that I started seeing in that time. And then I started seeing a psychiatrist as well, who helped me get on meds. And to be honest, the first round of meds was really rough, and it was hard to feel positive because I had really bad side effects to the first meds I tried to take. And I almost wanted to quit meds right then because it was really, really bad. And got really scared, and I felt so hopeless because I didn't know what to do. I ended up getting on a different med a couple months later, and that ended up being so good. Been on that for a while, and it's really, really helpful. And the big thing is these places I was grasping for help with, spiritual director, friends, support, therapist, psychiatrist, and meds. They were so good, and I needed them, and I needed truth and people to help hold me up when I couldn't hold myself up in the middle of it, in the middle of my spirals and questions and doubts and uncertainties. But despite having all of that, I had deep depression and despair. Every day for 5 months was really hard. There may have been a couple days or spurts here and there, because I do remember once or twice feeling like, okay, maybe I'm okay, only for it to come crashing down the next day or the next week, and it was awful. So it was like every day I would wake up and I would not feel like I could get up. I'd hate the idea of getting up. I'd hate the idea of doing the smallest, most minuscule tasks. It was really hard to show up for work. And when I did, I felt lost. I felt like I wasn't myself. I felt like everybody could see right through me. I felt so much shame over it. I felt like I didn't belong. I was working part-time at the church at that point. And so you're supposed to be this pastor. You're supposed to be this leader. And I couldn't show up. Even when I did show up, I didn't feel like I really showed up. I really struggled with despair. I remember thinking and telling people so often, this is never going to get better. I think I'm stuck. And I don't think I just felt deep in my bones that this will never get better. And it didn't matter how much anybody told me. It didn't matter how much I told myself. But, I know it's not always like this. It felt like I would never, ever, ever, ever get better. It's just despair. And so it spiraled into just the darkest place of feeling like I didn't know any way out of it. And bad idea on the worst day possible. On one of my worst possible days I had. This is kind of funny now when I think about it. But I was so in such a bad place that in the middle of a work day, I just said, I need to take some time off. And I'm going to go watch a movie by myself in a movie theater because I just can't do anything else today. And I like to watch the Academy Awards every year. And there was this movie that was out at that time that was going to get nominated for an Academy Award. And I was like, ooh, I really wanted to see this one. Let me go see it. It was Joker. If you're watching, you need to laugh out loud. That's probably really funny because it was the worst possible movie to see when you're in the middle of darkness and depression. It was awful. You go there, you're feeling off and you want to feel better. And then you watch someone who's struggling with this stuff and it goes literally as bad as it can possibly get. Not a good advice to do. Had to call my best friend even afterward just to talk and just be like, I'm not okay. So in this whole time, I knew I wasn't myself. And the self-condemnation, I think this is the big key for this video and like right now that I wanted to share about is the self-condemnation that I had for myself, like the self just loathing and hatred and the tapes I would play and what I would say to myself in the middle of this was so harsh and so dark. I don't know if you've ever felt this way, and I don't know if you've ever said these things to yourself, but the shame of being able to think you don't have anything going wrong. There's nothing going wrong here. You have this going on. You have this going on. You're about to get ordained. You've been working for all these things for so long. You've been just all the good things that were happening. But I felt so off, and that made me feel so bad about myself. And I thought, what is wrong with you? Why are you so upset? You have no right to be upset. Think about X person, these people. They have it so much worse than you. So the fact that you can't be okay when you're okay and nothing's going wrong means you are this awful person. You're this awful thing. I mean that was a tape that kept being played over. I would look at me and I would go, how could you ever lead well? How could you ever pastor? How could you ever be someone who is supposed to lead other people, who is supposed to point to hope and joy how could you ever care for other people when you suck this much? I mean, literally, these are the sort of things. Why can't you get better? You should be able to get better. You should be able to will yourself to get better. You should be able to pray yourself better. You should be able to do this. You should be able to get better. What's wrong with you? And then why do you keep repeating the same patterns? There's some life patterns that were going on in me, and I was just like, why are you so stupid? Why are you so awful? Why do you keep doing these things? What's wrong with you? You suck. Why do you let everyone down? And it got to the point where I was saying these messages to myself. It's how I was speaking to myself, is saying, I'm nothing. I will never live up to what I believe I am called to be or desire to be. I have all these things about what I feel like I want to be. I have all these things about what I think I am called to be, even what God has spoken to me that I'm going to be. And I will never, ever live up to it. I'm just that awful. And you will never be okay. You will never get better. And again, I've had some moments of those tapes that pile up over my life at different points, but they've lasted for max a week, right? This lasted 5 months. This was 5 months of no matter what anyone said, those messages were what I told myself. They were the only thing that could happen, because in the middle of my depression and my anxiety, I didn't know what to do with it. I just felt lost. I felt off. I felt wrong. I felt like I'd been led and been doing all these great things. And then for some reason, nothing was working. And it just spun me into the deepest despair I could possibly have. So try and picture that 5 months of just darkness. Some of you may have been experiencing that. Some of you might not. I don't know. But what ended up happening is not long before the post that I shared in December, that I had one of my darkest days of the year. And it was in this darkness that I actually had a vision that came to me, or an image that came to me. Hope it'll make sense. So just really, really, really dark, really full of self-condemnation and shame. And so I went on a Sunday morning, I remember it very specifically, I went on a Sunday morning to a coffee shop that I go to. One of the spiritual practices that I do on Sunday mornings before church is I spend a couple of hours in a coffee shop. That's just really where I have space. It's really where I connect with God. It's really where I just feel like I'm able to think and rest and process. And coffee shops are just some of my favorite places in the world. Absolutely love them. And so I went to this coffee shop that I go to every Sunday morning for a few hours early. And as I was there, I was just in the middle of darkness, and I was journaling and just pouring my heart out about how dark things felt and where I just was struggling with God, and really saying those things. And it was so weird. It was like I had a vision or an image that came to me. Now, I was not, I don't want this to sound weird. It wasn't like I was pulled into a trance. It wasn't like I all of a sudden wasn't where I was and I saw something else. I just started to have this intense image come to my mind. Intensely vivid, intensely clear, intensely, I could picture myself. And I knew it wasn't from me, because I don't think that way. That's not really how I picture myself. I don't think concrete. I don't think in images like that. And I don't paint these great things. I'm much more of a concrete sort of thinker. And so I just don't do this. And so all of a sudden I'm sitting there, and I had this vision, this image, and I'm going to describe this, and hopefully it'll make sense in how we get to this place of self-compassion over self-condemnation. It's what I call a forest. So this vision of me walking in this super dark forest, very, very, very thick, like brush everywhere. Just like picture that, with no lights on anywhere. It's in the middle of the night, just dark. And there's this small, narrow path in the middle of all this brush and darkness and forest everywhere. And I'm on the path, and I'm walking. I'm on this small little path. And I'm following a GPS. For me, this is, again, where when it talks about with God, it's like God had put into my GPS the destination that I'm going to. He's put it in there, and I don't know what it's called, and I've never seen it, and I've never been there before. But I know there's a destination he's put for me to go to. So I'm trying to follow it. And the best I know about it is these small little pieces that I can describe based on revelations or things in the past that I think he's revealed about where I'm going, what he's leading me to. One of those things would be something like that I sense call towards cross-cultural ministry or cross-cultural living in some way. And so I can describe a little bit, but I don't know really what that destination fully looks like. And so I'm following my GPS. And what I picture is that it's like I had put my GPS back for a while and I was walking for a while. And you know how like when you're in a car, you might put something in your GPS, and if you've turned off the notifications, you'll set it down and you'll be driving and you'll get lost driving. You won't know where you are, or you'll just get lost for a while. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, you're like, oh, I need to check my GPS. I haven't thought about it for a while. And you look down. Well, imagine like you're on this path and you look down at your GPS and it's off. Somehow it got turned off, whether the app freaked out for a second or something happened, it turned off and you didn't know when it turned off. You've been following this path, and it's like this idea of like, oh my gosh, how long has this been off? Am I still on the right place? God, am I where you want me to be? Did I miss a turn here or something? And so you're like, oh, okay, well, it just turned off. Let me reload the app and it'll tell me where I'm at. It's like you click on the app and it's just spiraling. It's just spinning. It's like that stuck wheel. And so it's just kind of going like this. And that's what I like pictured, is that I'd been going and I wasn't sure where I was. And I wasn't sure if I'm still on the right path. And my GPS can't tell me. And the terror of sort of kind of being lost in this super dark woods, don't know what's around you, no lights, no nothing. You're just out there and you don't even know where you're going. You're just following the GPS of what's going. It resulted in I could watch myself in this sort of vision and see this panic sort of sweep over me, because that's a really, really terrifying situation. It's just like this fear hits me. And so what I would do is, this is where the analogy sort of breaks down. So don't hold it specifically to the analogy, but the image of, I would all of a sudden grasp everyone who walked by, everyone who passed by. And I'd be like, tell me where I'm supposed to go. Where am I supposed to go? Help me. I need to know where I'm supposed to go. And everyone who passed by would be like, well, where are you going? And I'd be like, I don't know. I've never been there. I don't know what it's called. I can tell you a little bit about it, but I really don't know. I need you to help me. And it's like everybody can do their best to help you, but they can't tell you where to go because they don't know, because I don't know. I'm just following where I felt like I was doing, so that they can tell me their best. And then so I'd let people go, and then I'd try and interpret the signs around me, right? Like I'd try and see, I always hear about moss being on one side of the tree, meaning you're supposed to either sibilations that way or that way. And so does the moss on this side of the tree mean I'm supposed to go that way, or was it the other way? I don't remember how that works. And then have I passed that tree before? Is that my footprint? Is that someone else's footprint? And just trying to interpret signs around me and feeling like I had no ability to do that. I was lost. I was completely lost in the middle of this dark woods at night. And the result was just panic. Like I could picture and watch myself shrieking. I could picture and watch myself calling out and just being like, someone help me. Someone, please, anyone help me. I was watching myself wandering, like pacing back and forth and just being like, I don't know where I am. And just eventually breaking down into weeping. It's like bawling up. And what I came to realize is that this image that had been popping up was an image of me, of what my experience had been like for the last 5 months of my life. It was like the Lord really just put this image and made it so concretely clear for me to be able to see. Because remember, this whole time I'd been super dark despair, super rough, super desperate, super hating of myself, I hate everything about who I am. I can't measure up to anything. I want to be just stuck in this. And this was an image where I finally saw what I looked like to myself. And so what was so freeing about this for me is that it was the first time I could see myself outside of just my inner thoughts, and I could actually have compassion on myself. It was the first time I looked at myself and actually cared about me and didn't continue indulging this self-hatred, self-loathing, self-condemnation that was just continually in my heart, continually in my head, and continually in my spirit. Because if I would have responded in the image or the vision that way, it would have been like me looking at myself in that situation and shouting, "Ha, you'll never get out. You suck so much. How dare you? How could you possibly get lost, you idiot? You're never going to get out. You're never going to succeed. You're never going to move forward." And I would never, ever speak to myself or anyone that way. I would never speak to someone in a situation like in that forest and shout such negative self-talk, self-condemning, self-hating things. And so I don't know what it was about that helped it, but it was this image where I could finally see for myself and go, that's where I've been these past 5 months. I've been stuck in this dark forest and I haven't known where God has been. And I've felt like I was going in a path he was leading me towards, and all of a sudden I feel nothing. And I don't know how to get out of it. And that sucks. And this sucks. And I don't know how to get out of it. And that's okay. Like, if you are in the middle of a terrifying situation where you feel like you were doing what either God had you do, or that you were participating in what you sensed that you were supposed to do, and you were following it, and so you're trying to be faithful and you're trying to do the best that you possibly could, and then all of a sudden it happens that way. Like, of course that's terrifying. Of course that's scary. Of course that's fear-inducing. Of course all of that happens that way. But I had never thought of it that way. I'd only thought of how stupid I was, or how bad I was, or how wrong I was. And so to be able to look at myself with self-compassion and to say, it's okay. It's okay to feel this way. It's okay to even be in fear. It's okay to get out the emotion and the feeling of the fear and the paralyzing fear that seems to be there. You don't need to feel shame over this. You don't need to feel shame in any way. Like, it's okay to experience and express that when you feel lost and you feel broken. And so I don't know if that's a helpful first piece. There's some really big steps to move forward that I want to share I'm probably, like I said, maybe do a couple other videos of different principles or practices or things that I've learned. But I remember specifically that was so freeing for me, and I felt so seen and known and felt so self-compassionate that when I would get into the darkness and I'd spin off into the anxiety in coming days following that, I actually, when I would remember back the image of me being in the woods and being terrified and how I would treat myself and talk to myself, it became something where I went, oh, it's okay. And like every time I would hit those deep despair or spiraling anxiety points, I could look and say, this is okay. This is okay. I'm okay. It's not, I don't have to hate myself for this. I can really give grace to myself. I can really speak lovingly to myself. I can give myself compassion because this stuff sucks and it's hard. So just the first real big thing that I think can be helpful in the midst of these times of paralyzing anxiety, debilitating depression, and really spiraling anxiety and paralyzing fear, it just is that ability to stop the self-condemnation, to stop the self-hatred, the self-loathing, the you're never going to get better talk, all of those things, and not stop it by saying, oh, you should not feel this way, so stop it. That doesn't help at all. It's that ability to look at yourself with a grace and a compassion that honestly is the same grace and compassion that Jesus would see me in. Because God's not looking at me with a finger pointing saying, I want you to be a better pastor. I want you to be a better leader. I want you to be a better Tyler. You suck. It's looking at me and saying, hey, it's okay. I'm with you. I'm here with you. you're okay. And so, yeah, again, there's some other things that I want to get to in different ones. But that idea of just first self-compassion, self-care, I struggle with that term. So I don't know. That's not what I mean by that, but self-compassion and looking at yourself with grace and the eyes that God would look at you in the middle of fear, and then the same eyes that you look at others. So, all right, that's what I got for today. But thanks for listening. I appreciate it.